It was the kind of night a sailor dreams about. Far away from any city, out on Lake Superior. Inky, black, moonless sky, jam-packed with stars, and our galaxy, the Milky Way, running like a big, wide, sparkly river right through the middle of it all. We passed Outer Island, leaving the Apostle Chain headed northeast into the open lake. If you've ever had the thrill of sailing out there yourself, then you know enough about the geography of the place to be able to guess by now where we might be going. Yeah, it's Isle Royale, about 110 miles to the nearest tip of the island from our harbor in Bayfield on the South Shore in Wisconsin. It was an awesome adventure, but I had no idea yet of the kind of baffling mysteries I was about to run into head on, just over the horizon on that island. Now, right about midnight, our destination was maybe another 12 hours into the future. But what I was about to discover, laying buried out there, would take me back nearly 10,000 years into the past. Yeah, thousands of years before the Egyptians started building the pyramids, there were people on Isle Royale, thousands of people, working just as hard on something just as ambitious and maybe just as long-lasting, even if not as conspicuous as those pyramids. But we still don't have an exact understanding of these people, why they were doing this, or where all the products of their hard labor ever ended up. So this time, we're going back in time, way back, on my Duluthian life.
Let me tell you about my hometown, greatest in the Gopher State. I'll have to brag a little bit, but I really won't exaggerate. Big D-U-L-U-T-H, Duluth, Duluth. That's my hometown, Duluth, Duluth. That's my hometown.
All right, this is it. We'd been planning this most of the winter, and finally, the time had arrived. We'd wrangled a decent-sized sailboat, a 35-footer. We didn't own it. We were just a few friends who pooled our cash and rented it for a week. It cost us just about the same money we'd probably have spent on hotel rooms and gas and restaurant eating on a road trip. But Lake Superior is no road trip. It's every bit as wily and unforgiving as any ocean. 350 miles wide, east to west, and 160 miles north to south at its widest. And there's a word you hear repeated over and over whenever people talk about that lake: treacherous. So you don't venture out onto Lake Superior without a good bit of knowledge and experience, and a boat capable of taking pretty much what any ocean can dish out. The trip to Isle Royale is an overnight thing. On the trips I've made, we'd leave sometime around late afternoon, early evening, and arrive up there about the middle of the next day. So, this is it. Backing out of the slip, headed for the break wall. I think we all felt a few butterflies. Wow, we're really doing this. We set the sails. We cut the engine. For the next 100 miles or so, with any luck, it would just be the sounds of nature and a boat under sail. In perfect conditions, the trip takes a good 18 or 20 hours. I'm kind of a night person, so I usually volunteer for the graveyard watch, the 12 to 4. Sailing at night, for me, has a way of healing the soul. The stars, the light in the compass, your friends asleep down below. It's just you and your watchmate now, talking softly. And then there's all these tons of boat cutting through the water, driven by nothing but the power of the wind. If you got your navigation right, when the first light of dawn rolls around, there it is, or should be, Isle Royale. Still in the distance, but dead ahead. Isle Royale is a national park, one of the least visited in the system. More people visit Yellowstone on a typical summer weekend than will ever see Isle Royale in a whole year. There's only 2 ways to get there, by boat or by plane. The island's about 45 miles long and around 9 miles wide at the widest. There are no paved roads. You can take a ferry out there, or a float plane, and go backpacking, or you can go out in a boat of your own. Better be a good boat, like I was saying. The island is actually in Michigan, as the boundaries are drawn, but it's really much closer to Minnesota, about 20 miles from the North Shore. If you're at all the spiritual type, the way a lot of lovers of the outdoors seem to be, you might start to sense something about Isle Royale. It's the kind of cosmic force or whatever that people feel in places like Chaco Canyon or Chichen Itza or Stonehenge, places where ancient civilizations once gathered with a purpose. One of the things that boaters love about Isle Royale is all the protected harbors and isolated coves that dot the coastline of it, picturesque little bays where you can get in and drop anchor at night, go ashore in the morning, and do some hiking. And when you do that, there's a very high probability you're going to come face to face with moose. We didn't even have to go ashore one late afternoon, sitting in the cockpit, slathering pate on crackers, nibbling on a little brie, and washing it down with cold white wine. We heard a splashing sound. Looking up, maybe all of 50 feet away, a mama moose and her calf out for swimming lessons. Actually, moose are born with the ability to swim, and their hair is hollow, so they float. In this case, they came swimming or floating right past our anchor line. Moose are notoriously nearsighted, and we were downwind, so they might not have even realized we were there. And moose make all kinds of funny noises, too. Bulls can make a loud bellow, and sometimes they also croak and make barking sounds. Cows, the ladies, make long, quavering moans at the end of a strange cough-like noise. They also grunt to communicate with their calves, and that's what was going on around us that evening. A lot of grunting right next to the boat. Depending on the species, moose can weigh like 3/4 of a ton. They can store up to 100 pounds of food in their stomachs. They eat vegetation, including stuff growing on the bottoms of the lakes and rivers. But while moose eat greens, there are also wolves on Isle Royale, and among the delicacies they like most are the moose. Given this is such an isolated, closed ecosystem, the interactions of the moose and wolves in Isle Royale have been the stuff of countless wildlife studies. It's really pretty interesting. But I have found the study of another Isle Royale life form even more interesting. I'm talking about Homo sapiens, human beings. We've long known all about the fishermen, the lumberjacks, the sailors, whose shipwrecks are scattered all around the island, but we're really just now, just in these past few years, starting to find out more and more about far more ancient people on Isle Royale and what they were up to. This is totally mind-boggling stuff. I'm going to pick up the story. Let's go back. A little over 1 billion years ago. Yeah, over 1,000 million years ago. That's when Isle Royale was the epicenter of something called the Greenstone Flow, one of the oldest, largest, longest-lasting lava flow events on Earth. It's what gave Isle Royale its distinctive ridge and valley topography. Anyway, picking up the pace here, don't want you to get bored. Let's just jump ahead 1 billion years, okay? To just about 3 million years ago. That's when the glaciers were coming and going. Geologists say there have been maybe 8 or 12 different ice ages, each lasting around 50,000 years, give or take. The last ice age began dying down around 14,000 years ago. That's when we had a glacier covering the Lake Superior region. It was thousands of feet thick, maybe a mile or 2 deep. That one slid down and pressed so hard into the ground around it that it formed a hollow for Lake Superior. Imagine, if you threw a bowling ball onto a mattress. It'll dip the surface of your beauty rest downward around the bowling ball, which in this case are billions of tons of ice, actually. The outer edges of your Sealy Posturepedic are tilted, and this isn't sponsored, by the way, in case you're wondering. The outer edges of your mattress are tilted upwards, and those became Isle Royale to the north and Upper Michigan to the south. The glacier scraped out this huge basin, combing down Isle Royale like a rake through mud, except it was actually solid rock and minerals, not mud. And then the glacier stalled and it melted. Voila! Lake Superior. Now, it's just in these past several years that geologists, archaeologists, anthropologists have started finding out that as that glacier started going away, there were already people living essentially right up against it. In the Isle Royale and Upper Michigan area, there's evidence of people being there back about 14,000 years ago. But we still don't know a whole lot about them. The common guess is that they crossed the Bering Strait into present-day Alaska, maybe dropped off Sarah Palin's ancestors up there, and then decided they better move on quickly. I don't know. Some people think they were following buffalo herds, actually, coming from Asia. It's fairly widely agreed, though, that these are the first folks who ended up in northern Michigan, where Isle Royale is. We know these guys used chipped stones to hunt big game animals. They fished and gathered nuts, berries, and roots. Good on cold cereal or oatmeal to this day. Well, not roots so much, maybe raisins. They might not have had raisins yet, but much more importantly, they apparently did know how to make fire. And they're thought to have believed in an afterlife. The evidence makes it look like they buried their dead in a certain way with food and tools, so they wouldn't have to go looking around when they came back to life. Very considerate when you think about it. But now, later on, several thousand years later on, another group of folks appeared. They're what the researchers sometimes call the archaic people. They used a lot of maybe old-fashioned words and phrases, wore clothes that were out of style, plaid loincloths with brown shoes, you know? Okay, sorry. But I go there because we're used to thinking of these ancient people as stooped-over, grumpy, barely human hulks, capable mostly just of grunting as they foraged for their next meal. But not so. Not a mere 10,000 years ago. No. First of all, these so-called archaic folks had brains that were just as big as ours. They had language. We don't know what it was, but they had to have a way to communicate complicated stuff. Their rituals and traditions tell us they felt empathy and grief and were totally capable of symbolic thinking. So we can suppose there was no doubt the tribal cut-up, playing practical jokes on everybody. There might have been a neighborhood gossip, telling anyone who'd listen who'd gotten caught touching who, where. They probably laughed when somebody farted. You know, they were human beings. And these so-called archaic human beings were different from their predecessors, not as nomadic, more prone to settling down in one area. And when they settled down, they managed to do something that totally changed history. They discovered copper. Yes, copper, the stuff out of which the Bronze Age was made, and it appears these people in northern Michigan and on Isle Royale might well have been the first on Earth to do it. But now, you've just got the beginning of a long trail of mysteries that go on to this day. I first stumbled onto all this late one afternoon on Isle Royale. We'd sailed into McCargo Cove on the north side of the island. It's a long, narrow, fjord-like inlet with tall, rocky cliffs. There's a campground there, and stepping ashore, I soon encountered a backpacker who'd apparently just emerged from the woods. He was setting up his camp, and he looked a little archaic himself, pretty rough around the edges, as a backpacker will look after a week without a shower or shave. We struck up a conversation as I strolled past, rattling the ice cubes in my gin and tonic. Sailing is a much more civilized experience than backpacking, trust me. I've done my share of both. But I felt kind of guilty enjoying this iced drink right in front of my beleaguered new friend. So it wasn't long before he was sitting there in the cockpit with us, having one of his own. He asked if we'd been to the copper mines and started describing what was just up the trail from where we were sitting. So we agreed the next morning we'd go up there. The first thing that caught our eyes was a cavern with some twisted steel rails leading into it and some rusty mining car parts laying around. Not far away, we came to a deep ravine. As we walked into it, I didn't notice anything too remarkable, but get this. The cavern with the rusty rails was an abandoned copper mine dating back maybe about 150 years. The ravine where we were standing, that was also a copper mine, but this one was in operation a lot sooner. There's new research recently published in the scientific journal Radiocarbon that says mines like this one on Isle Royale probably started up more than 9,000 years ago, and their production peaked between 7 and 5,000 years ago. All around where we were standing were these rounded hand-sized boulders with deep chips on one end. I had my video camera with me, and our friend picked up one of those rocks and explained how researchers believe they were used.
This is like the used rock pile here.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. This is all the tools they've been finding all over the place.
Yeah, but this is why they just discard them when they
Well,
find
they're
them.
all palm size.
Right.
I mean, you know, they all.
Right. Like this
Yeah.
or palm or one hand.
It is when it's really busy. See, they all have that little notch taken out of the back for some reason.
No.
Is that green copper?
Success. You got a real aborigine doing it. It's really a good tool, I'll tell you. Works for me. I could probably get good with something like this.
There's a direct connection between those two copper mines, just a matter of a few hundred feet apart. One from the 1800s, and the other with the hammerstones dating back nearly 10,000 years, because it's the older one that led our 19th century prospectors to dig the new one. Now, set the time machine to spring 1848. That's when a certain Samuel O. Knapp was sent from back east by what would later become the Minnesota Mining Company. He was going to explore for copper in Michigan, including Isle Royale. As the tale is told, it was Knapp, or some of his people, who began to notice something strange about the formation of melting snowdrifts, these long, narrow depressions. He eventually called in a gang of workers, and digging down through something like 20 feet of decayed trees, debris, and rubble, they came upon a solid mass of smooth copper, 10 feet long, 3 feet wide, and about 2 feet thick. What's more, it had already been raised about 5 feet above the floor of the cavern and supported by wooden beams. The oak beams had long decayed into virtually powder, but the copper mass was still held in place by shifting dirt that had packed down around it. The ground all over the place was covered with these rounded hammerstones, just like the ones we held in our hands that day. The story goes that Knapp carried 10 wagon loads of those hammerstones away from one mine. He used them to shore up the walls of a well by the mine's headquarters. But now another thing. Those kind of rounded rocks, they're not found anywhere in nature on Isle Royale. The closest source would have been the north shore of Lake Superior, 20 miles away. That's 40 miles round trip over Lake Superior, carrying how many hundreds of tons of hammerstones? 6 or 7 or 9,000 years ago? But now, the plot really starts to thicken. It's pretty amazing to have found that ancient mine, isn't it? Well, soon enough, Knapp and his people found another one, and then another, and another. Today, the count is somewhere in the thousands, maybe as many as 5,000 of those ancient mines up there on Isle Royale and in northern Michigan, 60 miles across Lake Superior to the south. The math is fuzzy by nature, but some estimates of what it would take to excavate all those mines using methods available at the time would be on the order of 10,000 miners working for at least 1,000 years. And we know now it was more than 1,000 years. But now it's equally tough to try and estimate how much copper was extracted. But the low guesses are in the millions of pounds, and they go up a lot. From there to 1 billion pounds or more. I've read the economic value of this lode could be somewhere in excess of the proceeds of the whole gold rush. But I suppose that's adjusted for inflation. I don't know. What was $1 worth in 5000 BC? I have to look that up. It's all pretty hairy stuff, isn't it? But stay with me, it gets better. There's a school of thought that asks this question: where did all that copper go? The researchers that ask that question say it has yet to be accounted for. Now, I'm not going to list all the books and studies, and there's a whole lot of them that I've been plowing through, but you can Google it for yourself if you like. For starters, get online. Try something like Ancient Copper Mining in Michigan, or The Case of the Missing Copper, and just go from there. Some of these titles start to sound a little like a Sherlock Holmes adventure, don't they? Well, there's plenty of serious scientists that believe this is where things do get just as fictitious. And that's why I must now advise any credible archaeologists or mainstream anthropologists listening to this to plug their ears and hum, because I'm going to dish up a little more of what's out there. And trust me, it does get out there. We're rolling the time machine ahead about 50 years now to 1896. Story goes, 1896, two woodsmen are clearing land north of Newberry, Michigan. That's a ways west of Sault Ste. Marie. They're pulling out a big stump. Entangled in the roots, they find a stone tablet about 19 by 26 inches in size. On the tablet are 140 squares marked off, each with a symbol or character unknown to anybody around at the time. A little squiggly line, a little upside-down U-shape, and so on. Somebody had the good sense to take a photograph of that tablet, and copies of that picture still exist. I've seen them. The picture was sent to the Smithsonian Institution, but it didn't take the Smithsonian very long to get back to the Michigan locals to say it was apparently just some kind of a hoax. But then, 4 years later, in 1900, a British archaeologist, Sir Arthur Evans, discovers a huge 4,000-year-old palace buried by the sands of time on the island of Crete, off the Greek mainland in the Mediterranean Sea. What Evans found was the palace of King Minos. A figure of Greek mythology written about by Plato. The Minoans, as Evans decided to name the king's people, were nothing less than a long-lost civilization with artifacts ahead of their time compared to other Bronze Age folks that came along later. Among these artifacts, 3,000 inscribed stone tablets with writings in two different, mysterious languages one of which is even yet to be deciphered. Now, you know where this is going, don't you? Yeah, those funny squiggly symbols on the tablet found in Newberry by the woodsman 4 years before Evans discovered the lost civilization of the Minoans. Well, let's just say when you look at the picture of that tablet from Michigan and compare it to the writings Evans found on Crete, it sure does look just like a whole bunch of letters from the same alphabet. Something else about the Minoans. They were highly accomplished sailors with a huge fleet of big, seaworthy ships that traveled routes all over the Mediterranean and well into what was to become, later on, the Roman Empire. This was all, before Rome ever got to be such a big deal. Among the goods they traded was tin, the ingredient that, when mixed with copper, makes bronze. And the Minoans, sure enough, made bronze. So much bronze, they're considered to be a key driver of the whole Bronze Age. So, where did the Minoans get all the copper to make so much bronze? Well, you guessed it. Some of our favorite theorists online have an answer. They say there wasn't nearly enough copper around the Middle East or Asia to account for the demands of the Bronze Age, and so the Minoans, those prodigious seafarers, found their way to, ta-da, Isle Royale. The timing fits like a glove. The peak years of ancient copper mining around Lake Superior led right up to the dawn of the Bronze Age, which prospered, most of all, right along the Minoans' trading grounds. So that's where all those millions of pounds of copper went? Aha! And then yet another fact that fits the theory. Despite all the mining operations on Isle Royale, it appears nobody ever actually lived there permanently. Huh? It turns out where there is civilization, large villages that are inhabited for long periods of time, there is also garbage. That's what tells the tales of human history. Broken stuff we throw away, the tools and trinkets we abandon or lose track of, the bones of all the critters we ate, and so on. There's some of that stuff scattered around Isle Royale. That's how we know there were people there. But there just doesn't seem to be any great big villages where all these thousands of people could have settled and with any permanence for all those thousands of years. Where did they throw their stuff away? So, on the face of it, we have Exhibit A, missing copper, and Exhibit B, missing people. I don't know. Getting to be kind of a mind worm there for you, isn't it? But now, where's the smoking gun that just ties it all up and cracks this theoretical case wide open? For that, we're going to set the time machine again, right up to 2018. That's when an underwater investigative team discovered what's considered to be the oldest shipwreck ever found, probably caught in a storm and sunk 3,600 years ago, right off the coast of southern Turkey. Given the location and type of ship, which has been amazingly well preserved, by the way, archaeologists suspect it was probably bound for Crete. Yes, the empire of the Minoans. The cargo, 1.5 tons of copper ingots. Now, that copper's been analyzed and found to be more than 99% pure. That's real rare. In fact, as far as anybody knows for sure, there is only one place on Earth where the native copper is that pure. You guessed it, northern Michigan, Isle Royale. Now, I didn't make any of this up myself. You can read all about it. It's all over the internet. But, time to come clean for the sake of this podcast. Time to at least try to separate fact from fiction best we can. So, okay, if you're one of those respected archaeologists who've been plugging your ears since I told you to, you can unplug them now. Can you hear me? You, unplug your ears now. Yes, unplug them. Okay. Now, among the facts, there are plenty of mysteries. All kinds of stuff we just don't know, can't know for sure, about ancient copper mining on and around Isle Royale. The sheer number of mines and the amount of copper extracted is really huge. And the more we find out from research that's ongoing right now, the farther back in time it all appears to have begun. And the longer it appears those efforts continued. 4,000 plus years of mining is a pretty good fit with the science we've got now. And then, mysteriously, it ended abruptly. Not terribly long after that, the Bronze Age itself ended, also abruptly, taking many civilizations all over the world with it to similarly abrupt and mysterious ends. But now, let's go back to that tablet they dug up in Newberry, Michigan. Well, many of the characters engraved on it do bear amazing similarities to the tablets discovered later in Crete. There may be another explanation. What's on the Minoan tablets are some characters that survived into the language of ancient Greece. And a sufficiently learned American of the late 1800s might well have seen ancient Greek before, probably enough to have chiseled that tablet. So, the Smithsonian very likely got it right when they said it was a hoax. But does that prove the Minoans couldn't still have made it to Lake Superior 5,000 years ago? Well, if they did, of course, then we're rewriting most of Western history, and that deserves at least some shred of hard evidence. Remember what I said about garbage and archaeology? There is garbage to prove the existence of those archaic miners up there. Copper tools, weapons, keepsakes, some personal effects, whatever. But we don't have any Minoan garbage. Not a piece of a ship, and more importantly, no bronze. Bronze is made from copper, and the Minoans made a lot of bronze. They left all kinds of it, all over the Mediterranean. Did they really come all the way up to Isle Royale and just forget to bring any bronze with them? Not likely. Not likely. But what about the clincher of the case, that sunken ship loaded with all the pure copper? Well, okay, a careful listener, who didn't have his or her ears plugged, nor who was humming, might have noticed that the ship was loaded with copper ingots, not pure mass copper. Copper ingots are melted down, and cleaned of impurities. So, It was incredibly pure. And it might have been on its way to Crete, too. But alas, the cargo matches the kind of copper the Minoans were known to load up on out of Cyprus at the time, not Isle Royale. But still, okay, then where did all the Isle Royale copper go? For sure, pieces of it have shown up far away from the Great Lakes, 1,000 miles, maybe thousands of miles. Tools, weapons, trinkets, maybe out as far as somewhere in Mexico. So some say that the Isle Royale copper's been accounted for. Some say. Some say it hasn't. In a way, maybe it's a little like UFOs. People have all kinds of theories about them, but where's the proof that we can hold in our hands? In the end, that's what a mystery is. It's not about what we do know. It's about everything we don't.
Duluth, Duluth, oh, that's my hometown. Duluth, Duluth, that's my hometown.
My Duluthian Life with Jim Hayden is produced monthly by Planet Pictures Media. You can listen wherever you get your podcasts.